to do a huge Bavarian Bavop welcome to the one and only Sarah Jane Morris.
Hello there. So, I normally sing and talk in between songs, but this is the other way around. Some of you will know me from the duet that I did, which was #1 all around the world with the exception of America. And I did a duet with Jimmy Somerville of Don't Leave Me This Way. And back in the 80s, Jimmy was one of the first out gay singers that was really fighting the campaign for equal rights and to lower the age of consent, and he was a real inspiration. And he and I met at a miners' benefit because he was very involved because of his amazing friend who was the person that they made the film Pride about. He was worked for Gay's The Word Bookshop, and Jimmy was, through Bronski Beat, very involved there. I was with a 25-piece Brechtian big band doing political music from around the world, and we collaborated with Kay Sutcliffe, who was a Kent miner's wife, and we wrote Coal Not Dole, which became the anthem of the miners' strike. And this drew Jimmy's attention to me, and I'd had, with a band called The Republic, I'd had a big hit in the gay clubs, and I was singing in a mock operatic voice. I was singing, "My spies are in position round your house," to a Middle Eastern dance beat. And Jimmy and Richard Coles, a lot of you know Richard Coles, Reverend Richard Coles, who's actually moved just along the water. He's somewhere near Seaford at the moment, so Jimmy is in Brighton, Richard is near Seaford, and I'm in St Leonard's, so we're all three of us are making our home around here. But Jimmy was convinced that I was a man singing this song, and Richard, having been at drama college with me, was convincing Jimmy by bringing him to my concert to meet me. Jimmy is 5'2", and I'm 5'8", and he has red hair and a very high voice, and I have red hair and a very low voice. And it was a very interesting meeting, and we both met politically and decided to duet. And we had the big hit, and I travelled all over the world, and I realised that I hated being a pop star. It wasn't for me. I wanted to have a life where my child could grow up not being the centre of attention, not being the centre of press. I didn't want to be followed everywhere. And so I tried being with major record companies and independent record companies, and nobody quite got me. But I signed a major deal with Jive Records, and my first single, because at that point I wasn't a singer-songwriter, I did a cover of Billy Paul's Me and Mrs. Jones. Radio 1 banned it. It was terrified that I was a glamorous lesbian coming out of the closet because I hadn't changed it to Me and Mr. Jones, which would have been acceptable. So at that time it was okay to be gay, but it wasn't okay to be lesbian. 4 years later, K.D. Lang came out gloriously. Every record company contacted me. Everyone wanted to sign me. I wasn't a lesbian. Once again, I had to go to the back of the queue. It was the end of my career in England, and luckily for me, a man I didn't grow to love, but someone who was a fellow redhead, asked me to go and support him around Europe. It was Mick Hucknall, Simply Red. I picked up a big following in Europe. Most of the press thought that I was his kid sister because of the red hair. And I managed to sort of have a following in Europe particularly. Me and Mrs. Jones was a huge hit. Nobody asked the question. I was asked on Newsbeat 3 times to be asked if I was a lesbian. I couldn't say that I wasn't. It was undoing everything that we had fought for. But that's what 1989 looked like. So I eventually decided to set up my own label because nobody was going to let me write the songs that I wanted to write, which was the human story. So I set up a record label called Fallen Angel Records. And it's just me. I'm a one-person cottage industry, and I finance all my albums. I've made 13 solo albums through that label. And what I do is, all the concerts that I do, I put 50% of everything I earn into a special account, and that's how I pay for the album, which allows me to do concerts around the world. But because I tell the human story, a lot of doors are closed. I'm called the female Billy Bragg. They are terrified of anyone that speaks about what's happening. I speak about it through song. Everything from homophobia to honor killings to the stolen Nigerian girls, Boko Haram. I try to find a way of, through seducing through beautiful music, of putting those stories across. I do a lot of research. I have no television. I haven't had a television for 13 years. So sometimes I hear something on the radio, and sometimes it's a fan or a friend that draws my attention to a story. And if I feel that it really moves me, I do the research and I try to find out as much as I can so that I can tell that story. And I did an album just before the lockdown, which had just won an Edinburgh First Award. It was directed by Mark Thomas, the political comedian, and it was taking the music of the Scottish singer-songwriter John Martin. And what I did was I revisited his songs and I changed them and I claimed them and I made them my own. Now John's sister is here tonight. I've become very good friends with the family because what we did with this project, which we recorded here in Eastbourne, by the way, we went all over the country and we interviewed friends and family and fellow musicians that had worked with John, and we turned it into a film, and Mark directed the theatre show. I would have toured that all over the world, literally the day that COVID, the first lockdown, happened. So that album never really saw the light of day in the way that it should. And I found myself at home without a television, wondering what the hell I could do to stay sane. And what I decided to do, and it was just, I wasn't thinking of its future, I was just thinking of a way of keeping myself sane, was I said to my husband, who I found out was also a good writer. He's an artist, by the way, but because we had no money, I didn't work for 2 years, I didn't earn money for 2 years, and he wrote me a really beautiful poem for my Christmas present. And it was a poem that deserved to be a song. And I thought, it would be really interesting, we have 2 sofas, we can sit opposite each other, if we read to each other and maybe write something together. I couldn't write about Brexit, which had destroyed my career in Europe, and that's where most of my career is. I couldn't write about COVID, and I haven't yet found the right angle to write about climate change. So I decided to choose 10 female singer-songwriters that had inspired me, that had made a difference to musical history. Now, it isn't everyone's choice, they're my 10. But they're my 10 because my life has weaved around theirs and connected with them. Some of them I know, some of them I performed with. Now this list of 10 are Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Miriam Makeba, Aretha Franklin, Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, Ricky Lee Jones, Kate Bush, and Annie Lennox. It's the passing of the torch through the generations. These singers, these brave singers, all of them have been brave in their journey, and all of them have made a difference. And very few of them are in the history books for doing that. It's the men. So, starting with Bessie Smith, her life journey was incredible. She was the most famous blues singer. It's in the history books as being a man, but it was Bessie. And Bessie started off by being in Ma Rainey's travelling show as a vaudeville artist. She was a black lesbian in the 1920s. That is an incredibly brave thing to be. And because of segregation, she wasn't able to go into a restaurant or a hotel if she was on tour. So what she did, being so successful, was she bought a Pullman train. And she toured around America in her train, and she took all of her traveling show with her. And that meant they all ate, and they all slept, and they were safe. And she had the bastard husband as the manager, who she didn't have that sexual relationship with, but nevertheless, he used her money to finance his latest girlfriend. And she was, at the very end, left with very little money. And you had the 1930s depression, blues. At the end of that was no longer the music, it was jazz. She made the way for Billie Holiday. And she had to do what I kind of had to do at the end of the communards, which is go back to reality and get back into a van and start touring in that way, having been this huge artist that she was. She was finding herself driving with one of her musicians down Route 66 to a concert, and a van drove into her. It severed her arm. She went to 3 different hospitals and she was turned away because she was black. Racism killed her. She found herself in an unmarked grave because the bastard ex-husband had taken all of the money. 33 years later, Janis Joplin, who was incredibly inspired by her and influenced by her, found this out and paid for the gravestone, died that year. Their lives are the passing of the torch. But those first 5 singers are particularly brave. And I wouldn't be able to be the singer-songwriter that I am today had they not made their journeys. I fell in love with each one of them. I already was a fan of their music, but their life stories were incredible. And so I found myself with these great lyrics. Mark and I read to each other and we together wrote these stories, very respectfully, no gossip. And then my guitarist, Tony Remy, who I share with Annie Lennox, who is one of the singers in this, because she is such an important fighter for women's rights, for human rights, still, as she's approaching her 70s, she is still incredibly active there. And I'm linked with her in as much as at the very beginning of my career, I was singing in a wine bar in Chalk Farm, and she and Dave Stewart had just left the Tourists, and they were renting at this point a little studio in Chalk Farm. And they came into the wine bar I was singing in and had a drink, and I have a very low voice and they needed low voice on their single that they were recording. So they asked me if I would do the backing vocals on the first single, which is called Into the Garden, but they had no money. So we did a bartering where I was about to take a show to the Edinburgh Festival, and they gave me free studio time, and I did their backing vocals. Tony Remy, who I've written the music with, was Annie's guitarist for many years, and he's my right-hand man. And what we decided to do with these songs is write each song as if the artist it was about had written the song. So for instance, the song about Joni Mitchell sounds like it could be a Joni Mitchell song, but it's about her. It's been the most glorious project to write, to record. It's all been recorded here in Eastbourne, but I found myself with no pennies put into the bank to be able to pay for this. So I had to think big. I didn't think a one-person show at the Edinburgh Festival, which is what I've always done before. I thought big time. I thought theatre show with at least 10 musicians, and I thought radio series and documentary. And that's how I've approached this last year. I found myself being daring enough to book a studio in Eastbourne 2 months hence, thinking that will make me find the money. I've never taught, I've never studied music. I studied to be an actress. I fell into singing. Total accident. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm 63. I've been doing it since I was 20. I've been making it up for 43 years. So I've had many, many people ask me to give them singing lessons, and I've always said, I can't. I don't know how to do that. But I had to come up with a reason why people would give me money. So what I did was, for 1 hour, I didn't know it was just going to take an hour, but I put an advert on Facebook asking people that wanted to either sing or were singers that would like to come to St Leonard's. I asked all of my friends to give a room and charge only 50 quid for the night. We provided all the breakfast, and my husband and I cooked vegan food for an entire weekend, and another friend has a converted bank, and that's where we did this particular workshop, which took a whole weekend. I had 14 people from all over the country that came, and I taught them the backing vocals of 4 of my songs, which they then came to Ronnie Scott's to sing with me for 2 nights. That raised the money for those 4 days in the studio. I did Airbnb with our spare room when we were able to last year. I kept all the money aside, knowing that even though we needed it, it was going to be used for that project. That paid for the musicians. Somebody bought me a sewing machine last March for my birthday, and I found myself making cushion covers and curtains and selling them on eBay and on Marketplace. That got the money for the backing vocalists. And bartering came back into this, because just on the last day of the recording, I was contacted by a guy called Guy Chambers, who was the man who co-wrote all of Robbie Williams' songs. I didn't know him. He asked me if I'd come and do a session. I had no idea what I was going to. I was exhausted. I'd done 4 days in the studio, but I knew I needed the money, whatever the session was. I ended up by singing all of the parts for David Walliams' musical with Robbie Williams. I was singing all the parts for Julie Walters, so it was all about being in an old people's home. So I was singing songs about farting, about wetting the car seat, you name it. That was my job for the day. And at the end of the day, I dared to say to him, I haven't been able to record all the vocals for my song, because all the time went into getting the songs down. Is there any way you wouldn't pay me, but let me have your £1,000 a day studio? He was so shocked that he said yes. And then I had to ask him for another day, because 10 songs in 1 day is pretty difficult. So I bartered, and I owe him a session. But that's the way this album has happened. I did a GoFundMe where I asked people to donate by pre-ordering this CD. The CD is called The Sisterhood, by the way. And then I found myself knowing that for Miriam Makeba, who was incredibly important in my career, I needed to go to South Africa, having never been, to record the Soweto Gospel Choir, because I had written amazing backing vocals for them in Xhosa, which was her language. Now, Miriam Makeba not only was the most famous and successful African artist in America, because Harry Belafonte took her over, politicized her, and introduced her to the United Nations. And he, on the second time there, convinced her to do a very pleading and moving speech. She was part responsible for the United Nations boycotting South Africa. Now, we raised enough money for myself, my co-writer Tony Remy, and my guitarist to go to South Africa. By the time the GoFundMe money came through, the flights had doubled. I didn't know quite how to let everyone know that we might not be going. I remembered that an early boyfriend, and an early significant boyfriend of mine, was Dali Tambo. Dali Tambo was the son of Oliver Tambo, who was the head of the ANC for the whole time that Nelson Mandela was in prison. Jerry Dammers and Dali set up Artists Against Apartheid. I was very involved with Artists Against Apartheid. The person that got me involved in music in the first place was a guy called John Matshikiza, who's a black South African actor. He and his father came over as exiles from South Africa. His father wrote the musical King Kong, which is what brought Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba to London. So our paths crossed many times. I'm just gonna, I don't know if I've got time. Have I got time to very quickly do a tiny, tiny bit of, I'm gonna give you a cappella, a little bit of an idea of the Bessie Smith song. Oh, the Queen of Blues, she was raised in Tennessee. Though her father was a minister, she was born into poverty. Both parents died before she had even turned 9. Oh, and at that age on 9th Street, I tell you, she would sing for a dime. Yeah. Once she turned 18, she joined the traveling show. With Ma and Pa Rainey, so much to learn, so much to know, yeah. Then Bessie had her own Pullman. Yes, she became the greatest of the few. She put the blues on the map from the north to the south, and just about everybody knew. She was the queen who knew how to shimmy. She was the queen who knew how to shout. She was the queen who knew how to drink bootleg gin that the blues couldn't be without. The blues couldn't be without. There's many more, but I've got a feeling we're coming to the end. Now, I'm needing to raise £5,000 to be able to mix this album in Eastbourne in September. And my husband has donated a lot of his artwork. He's a successful and wonderful artist. And my brother's a photographer, and we have a lot of prints to sell. I am offering at-home concerts, vocal lessons, you name it. We're prepared to do almost anything that you suggest within reason. And we are just down the road. So I have 2 months to find that money. But I will give you a handout just to remind you as you leave, just in case you want a reminder, because you can pre-order the CD for only £20. And if all of you here tonight did that, that does make a difference. So, a couple of months ago, I've been very involved with Refugee Support. I originally got involved through the wonderful singer Ian Shaw. And I was no use on the ground in Calais when I first joined, because I need 2 replacement knees, and that hasn't changed. COVID has not allowed me to yet have either one of them replaced. And so what I can do is write songs, and I can do benefit concerts. And I asked the most wonderful musicians all over the country to donate their time to record in their own home this song. It's one of the most iconic songs. It's a peace song. And I know I'm probably talking about this a little bit too early, I might know. But everyone donated their time for free. And I've set up something on my website, which is www.sarahjanemorris.com, where you can donate as little as £2.50 or up to £20. Every single penny goes to Refugee Support. We've already raised about £750. And it's cheaper than a cup of coffee, £2.50. And it's surely worth it, because every one of us could at some point be a refugee. It could be you. It could be me.
The one and only Sarah Jane Morris, everybody.